Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you to everyone at Open Mouth for all of y'all's work. I've been a big fan for a long time. I'm from Arkansas, so I've always, of course, kept tabs on what's going on in Open Mouth, and I'm so excited to be with y'all. I see some familiar names in the chat, etc. So this is kind of a dream come true. And speaking of dreams come true, I also get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is ekphrasis writing and how it's kind of changed over the years. Not exactly the writing itself, but how we're viewing it. I would argue that fan fiction has been a part of literary writing for a very long time. I would argue Milton dug into some biblical fan fiction if we want to go there. I think that Dante was thinking some sort of biblical as well. So when we think about fan fiction, it's really popularized recently, but I think that we need to give it more credit than it's been given in the past and really see how it's been a part of our landscape for a long time. We're going to look at some modern ekphrastic writing and some modern ekphrastic fan fiction writing in poetry, specifically looking at the poet author Garrick Austin today. So let me share my screen with y'all real fast because I do teach. So, of course, when there's a chance, I will make a presentation. Um, it's just the way I roll. And please feel free to send any questions or thoughts into the chat. I did also want to give a shout out to my Twitter and Open Mouth Twitter. I love using Twitter to connect with the writers and readers, and I think that if y'all are there, follow us and also tweet about the events they have because they're so much fun. Okay, so fan fiction as ekphrastic writing. Oops, let's see if it's going to. Okay, here we go. So I want to start out with some definitions. So the definition of ekphrastic writing is description in Greek, and it's a vivid description of a scene or a art piece. It uses imagination to narrate and reflect on the action of the painting or sculpture. This definition is from Poetry Foundation, and they specifically mention Ode on a Grecian Urn, which is probably one of the most popular pieces of ekphrastic writing out there, though there are so many more by many of your favorite authors, Shelley, Dickinson. They've all done it. Art inspires art, and that really is what ekphrastic writing is about. It also, I like this little picture of Keats thinking about the ode on the Grecian urn with his little heart. It's very appropriate for today. But what we have come to see is a lot of times only certain arts get written about. I mentioned the Bible earlier. Obviously, we have a Grecian urn here. And this comes to play in our discussion of high art versus low art. So I pulled this article on high versus low art, which I recommend you check out. I am going to send the presentation to Open Mouth so that they can share it with y'all. And you'll have a chance to take a look at all my links, etc. But here's what he has to say. He said that there are those who place a greater value on high art and sometimes believe that high art serves a kind of spiritual or moral function. A common assumption is that high art is edifying and low art is mere entertainment. So, what they're really saying is that some types of art are worth looking at and some are not. We've seen this film versus television is common, right? TV is considered kind of low art. We're starting to get more high art television in the past 20 years, especially with the advent of HBO, etc. But for the most time, film, not movies, film is considered high art. And then television is considered low art. We'll also see paintings are considered high art. Comics are considered low art. So these are kind of arbitrary ideas about what is worth talking about and what is worth not. What is considered actual art versus what is considered just entertainment. And that's kind of where we start digging into fan fiction as well. I'm not sure how to, let's see. There we go. Okay. Before we get to the fan fiction definition, I do want to talk about ekphrastic art um, in a modern way. And so we are going to talk about Derek Austin and how he utilizes ekphrastic art. There are a couple of things that we need to talk about when we talk about ekphrastic art. And those were in our definition from Poetry Foundation. Description and interpretation. Would somebody like to read this poem for us? I can't actually see you all, so if somebody would, please put it in the chat.
I can do it if no one else wants
That
to.
would be,
I'm
that
happy
would
to.
be great. Thank
Okay.
you, Molly.
Sure. Vermeer's Woman Holding a Balance by Derek Austin. Her balance is empty except for light. Unconcerned with worldly goods, she pauses. Gold chains and pearls, bright as poured milk, recede in the allegory. Christ hangs on the wall outside her gaze. Who could compare his damning hand to her delicate calibrations? For once, light symbolizes the pleasure of a woman tying pearls around her neck with yellow lace. She sees the world in the garland. All things held in common and weighed against the light isn't enough to tip the scale.
Thank you so much, Molly. So what we have here is what's considered classic ekphrastic writing. He's writing about a specific painting, Vermeer's Woman Holding a Balance. It's a very old painting. It's a very classic painting. It's very much something you would see in a museum. I'm 100% sure he saw it in a museum and was inspired to write this piece. So this is kind of what we expect from ekphrastic writing. Sorry, for some reason it takes a minute for it to switch slides. Just when I give up, it doesn't. Or does it? There we go. Okay. Ah! Okay, now it's freaking out. There we go. So we have the description and the interpretation. I would love for us to put some of these lines in that space. Would anyone like to take the first, let's say this first line and say whether or not it's interpretation or description? And we can just unmute at this point since it's all of us. Yes.
I think it leans a little more towards description, but it's also interpretive.
Right.
I mean,
So
I
just
feel like it's already assigning meaning to it.
yes, it's already, so that's what's hard, right? But it's also part of our jobs as writers. It's not just to say it is blue, but to describe the blue in a writerly way, right? And I think that's what you're saying here is that the words that we use to describe also have meaning in them already. But I think of the two, it probably does fit best in description. Let's see if it will let me copy and paste that. Or maybe we'll just highlight it. Okay, we'll highlight it. No, maybe. No, will it let me? Yay. No, it won't let me. Okay, let's just, there we go. Okay, see, as soon as you give up is when it does it. Okay. Unconcerned with worldly goods, she pauses. What do we think about this one? Is this interpretation or is this description?
Sounds like interpretation.
Right, because we know that that it's a still moment that it's painted, but we don't know if she's pausing or if she's moving. So he's having to make that decision for us. If this is going to be annoying, we might just have to not highlight. That's fine. But let's see if we can do it. Yay. Okay. Then we have the next line. Gold chains and pearls bright as poured milk recede in the allegory. This one's a little more difficult. It reminds me a little bit like we have some words here that seem descriptive and some that seem interpretive. Does anyone want to give it a yes? I'm sorry. I'm having trouble seeing everybody at once, but I see a hand.
It's interesting because I see a pivot from description to interpretation at the break.
Okay. Yes, I think that's a great.
Bright as poured milk is a very visual image, and then recedes in the allegory. That's like there's interpretation again.
I think that's a great point, and it's also a great. We're not going to be able to do this as neatly as I would like, but I think that's also a great point as to how he's using line breaks there too to make the turn in and of itself. Okay, so then we're saying recede in allegory is interpretive, right? Oops. Oh my gosh. Okay, and then we have Christ hangs on the wall outside her gaze. Do we think that's descriptive or is that more interpreted?
Can we see the image again? Because
Yeah.
when I was reading it, like I don't see Christ actually in this. I don't know what that painting is behind her, if there's a Christ in there or not. But that line seems like it could be either. Just if Christ is actually in the painting, then it could be descriptive. But since we can't really see what's beyond her, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I've ever really examined too closely if he's actually in there. I kind of took Derek's word for it. I was like, yeah, he said Christ is there, so that may completely change what we're seeing there.
I think in the full painting, the image here is a little bit cropped. I think in the full painting, it's more obvious. You see more of it. The image within the image, you see more of it behind her on the wall.
The downside of our presentation. I do think it's probably doubling. I think it's doubling as metaphor as well. Yeah, like she's not thinking about Christ because he's outside of her gaze kind of idea. I think that's a good point, that here we have something that's doing double work. So I think that we can say that it's descriptive, but I think that this is a good point, that our description should always be doing double work. It should be lending itself to words that are going to be, like we said in the first sentence, that give a meaning to our description. Or in this case, it also gives us a metaphorical ideal as well. And then we have a question here all on its own in this couplet, which a couplet itself we could talk a lot about. But what do we think about? Who could compare his damning hand to her delicate calibrations?
I would say interpretive. But I would also say that it's again sort of a metaphor and like putting stuff onto the woman. There's a lot of like dogma being shifted onto her.
Onto both of them, right? Like suddenly Christ has become damning, whereas she is delicate, and all of the connotations that come to those words. Let's make sure the whole poem's on there. Okay. For once, light symbolizes the pleasure of a woman tying pearls. So let's start with the first line. What are we thinking?
I think it's interpretation, but I also think it's not just interpretation. It goes into deep opinion.
Yeah. I mean, he's decided that this is the only time that this is at least one of the very few times that it is happening. Oops. And not kind of the norm for this sort of thing. All right. Unfortunately, we do have a couple more exercises I want to do together, so I don't want to go through the whole poem. What I want to point out are a couple of things. He does use both of these ideas, description and interpretation, but they're so tied together. We can't have one without the other. Our words have to be utilized to do both simultaneously. And they all give us insight into the author of the poem, more so than the painting itself, for sure. We know he chooses a piece of art that is so well known that many people have a general idea, many people, not all people, which is one of the downfalls, I think, of using high art, is that while we can look it up and Google it, it is not probably one of the best known, and maybe one of the downfalls. But he chooses a piece that a lot of people do know, and he adds the description but layers it with interpretation the whole time. But it's so layered that it's very difficult. I did it on my own earlier, and you can see that mine's different than what we did already, because it's so difficult to kind of see. I thought Christ Hangs is descriptive. I think we decided that was interpretive. There are arguments for each way because they're so intertwined. Now, how does this shift when we start talking about fan fiction? Let me hit play again on this again so we can make it big again. Okay. Well, first, let me describe what fan fiction is. Merriam-Webster, which I'm not always like according to the dictionary, but Merriam-Webster says it's stories involving popular fictional characters that are written by fans and often posted on the internet. That's a very basic interpretation of it. I think that there are a couple of articles, one by the New Yorker and one by a podcast called Fansplaining, that really give a lot more definition to the ideas of fan fiction that are more expansive, discuss things about that get into some of the details about, does it have to be pop culture? Can it involve real people? How does copyright work? So if you're interested in that, I definitely suggest clicking these links and really learning a little bit more about fan fiction. Fan fiction is fun. I think that is one of the most iconic things about fan fiction, is that it is really one of those arts that people get in because they enjoy it. You know, it's really something that drives itself. It has a lot of direct access to a community that's already built. So there are a lot of advantages to fan fiction. But how do we use that when we talk about poetry, which is and ekphrastic poetry, which is not really a part of the fan fiction community that often. Like fanfiction.net, I think it is. I always want to say .com, but I think it's .net. And Archive of Our Own, which are the two main websites for fan fiction. They do have areas for poetry, but they're not the most well populated. So when we start thinking, how does this high art meet this, what's considered a low art fan fiction, how do we start changing that description and interpretation? And I think one of the biggest changes that we see is interaction. This is when the author is interacting with the author of the piece or with the piece itself, and starts imagining themselves as part of this world, not just trying to understand the world or put their own stamp on it, but instead becoming a part of it. Let's see how long this takes. Switch over. Maybe I should just start doing it a lot earlier. There we go. Okay, and I will say this poem has a lot of adult themes in it, so if you're not comfortable with that, feel free to maybe step away for a minute and come back in a little bit. But this one does contain adult themes. And this is also by Derek Austin. It's called Hotline Bling, Voicemail. Would somebody be comfortable reading this poem? I like how I was like, it's got adult themes. Who wants to read it? That's okay. I'll read it. Hotline Bling, voicemail. Ever since I left the city, you got me fucked up. Can't even say deep. Your name inked on the sweet meat of my thigh, crossed out Drake. What happens to a meme deferred? Does he thirst trap on Instagram? Sip, you know what? I don't know how to say this. Duace, maybe? With Odell? I'm sorry?
Douce?
Douce, okay. Sip Douce with Odell. I loved you before the beard and protein shakes. Morgan says we should all get free therapy. We should call it reparations. Can I dance inside a sad lamp? My feelings are obsidian, opaque. Two things don't abandon Black people: death and style. And death learned living from us. Derivative and late it whines. It belly aches. Calling you was my first mistake, Aubrey. I masturbate. I dream you do not move, but grant for prayer's sake. I dream that you and I don't move. What gives the night its name? What bloody sway? Like a mandrake, I holler D when I wake. So this is Derek. Again, we see a classic couplet, which is very tied to romance. We are going to watch just the first minute because it's a long video of Hotline Bling and kind of see where he started his inspiration from. Okay, so as we can see here, this song is not about a homosexual relationship as Derek has interpreted it. And instead of focusing on the theme of the song or the theme of the video, he changes it around so that he's the one who's left the city, but he's still thinking about the person behind. And in this case, he's interacting with the actual character of Drake, of Aubrey. Aubrey is Drake's real name for those who don't know. And he is utilizing his own depression, his own desire, and creating a new poem that is focused instead on the actual artist here. And I would argue that this is fan fiction, that he is taking the idea that is created in Hotline Bling. Somebody leaves the city and is discussing their phone relationship and their kind of past sexual relationship. In this case, I would say a more romantic relationship than perhaps Drake describes. And is thinking about his own Blackness, his own love, his own style of existing, and how that relates to his relationship with Drake as a person and a character. As we can see here, we move way beyond description, way beyond interpretation, and into interaction, into fantasy, into what ifs. And I think that is probably the biggest difference between writing ekphrastic writing about a painting and writing ekphrastic writing as fan fiction. I wanted to pause here and see if we had any questions before we go into our writing prompt. Yes.
Oh
wait, now I can't hear anything.
Oh.
Because of course. Let's see. I turned off my Bluetooth. What did I do to the audio on here? Oh, okay. It's going into. Okay, let's try again. I think we've got.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. As someone who reads and writes fan fiction, I think my question about that statement. Self-insertion is a
I,
very specific
yeah,
subgenre of fanfic.
it's not the only part.
Right.
It's not the only way to fanfic.
So I'm curious about, is it possible to write ekphrastic? Ekphrastic? I don't know how to say it. Poetry in a that is fan fiction without being that self-insertion, but then is it possible to write poetry without kind of being self-insertion, I guess would be.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let me double check the packet I sent y'all and see if I have one because I hadn't anticipated that question. So let me see if I have something here. This one is Bleeding Heart, and that one is self insertion. A lot of it is about the relationship in here. Now, I would even argue that Ode on a Grecian Urn has its own idea of fan fiction here, right? Because it is not just interpreting what's on there, it's imagining. There's a lot of discussion here of bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss. So it describes a lot of what's happening there, but it assigns a lot of roles, etc.
Mhm.
To who these people are and what they do. Let's see here. Nature poem while watching Jurassic Park. I think a lot of these questions, a lot of the poems start with this question. If I were a character in Jurassic Park, I might. So we do see a lot of self insertion in ekphrastic poetry. I don't think it has to be that way, and I feel like I've been challenged now to find some that is not, and I am very excited about that challenge. And I might reach out on Twitter and see what I can find because I don't believe I have any here. We have this kind of conversation with Lana Turner that I would say is ekphrastic poetry. Lana Turner, we love you, get up. This one is 100% in self insertion. This is an amazing piece. If y'all haven't seen it, where Eduardo Corral is sexualizing this character, and yes, when I yawn, he'd pluck black petals out of my mouth is one of my favorite lines in all of poetry. So I definitely. Here is one about that Derek wrote as well. Yeah, I was like, it's about mainly Drake and describing Drake, but we do have some self insertion at the end. And my own that I'll be reading tonight is 100% self insertion. So I think that's a really great point that it can be a narrow perspective of fan fiction to say that it is only self insertion. So maybe I should have narrowed my own workshop and said this is self insertion. But I am now challenged to find poetry that's like that, and I challenge everyone to write poetry that is like that, and I also challenge myself to write poetry that is fan fiction that is not self insertion. So a great point. Thank you so much for bringing it up. Do we have other questions about the poem, ekphrastic writing, or fan fiction thus far?
Kim said something really interesting in the chat, just pointing out that folklore pieces do it and that like retellings are part of this conversation.
Yes, that's a great point. Folklores often change the perspectives, change ideas that are already kind of in existence to understand our own interactions and how things have been do or do not occur according to our own ideas. So folklore is a great way of thinking of it. Yeah, fan fiction has been misaligned. Misaligned. Miss. What's the word?
Maligned?
Maligned. Thank you. Maligned. This is why I write and don't talk. Um, Maligned for so long. And I think that, when we look back at what it does, it's such a large part of our culture. And it's really a beautiful way of thinking about ourselves, but also about thinking about the world around us. So, yeah, definitely excited to think about it outside of self insertion. But when we think about it with self insertion, it really is about how we interpret our own world, how we create safe spaces for ourselves or create a lot of worlds that we don't get to see, right? In this space, you see Derek talking about blackness. You get him see him talking about homosexuality and desire and loneliness. And maybe there aren't a lot of other ways for him to talk about that. He's talking about it though from Vermeer to Drake. So we also get to see a range of how we can think about ourselves in art. Now, when it came to finding a prompt for this, it was very difficult for me. I'll be honest. One thing we have to think about is what is a pop culture icon or an art icon that we all know. I had to admit I was a little biased, and I went with one of my faves, um, which is Beyonce. I I went classic. I went Beyonce. If you haven't read Morgan Parker, and Morgan is referenced in this poem by Derek, yes, if you haven't read that, her book, There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce, in this world than Beyonce. It is a great piece that also thinks about it. It may be not self-insertion. That would be really interesting to think about because it has poems like Beyonce at her therapist's, and stuff like that. So it's a really great way to think about it. One of the things I like most about Beyonce's beautiful music videos is that they are very, very unusual. They're very surrealistic, and there are so many points of interest. So I kind of want to spend a moment watching this video, and what I want to suggest is that though we might try it with this music video, that you find your own art pieces, you find your own icons in your life. I'm writing my own Jurassic Park poems right now, for example. I know Hannah did as well, Hannah Inzer, which is in that workshop packet. My partner writes a lot about films. David Trinidad, and wrote an entire book of haikus about soap operas. So there are so many ways to engage with your favorite icon. So though we're doing this with Beyonce, don't feel pressured to think about it this way. Think about it towards your own eventually, and just we're practicing now. So I understand not everybody's as obsessed with Beyonce as I am. Do I understand it? No, but I get that that happens. So what I'd like us to do is watch the video once and think of like maybe 3 to 5 words to describe it and 3 to 5 words to interpret it. Okay, great. So can we name maybe 3 to 5 words that we would use to describe this music video? And it doesn't have to be the whole music video, like moments of description. Like he talked about the gold or the pearls or Christ hanging on the wall. So something that visually stood out to you. Or it could, he also used in his fan fiction version, he used a literal line. So perhaps a line that stood out to you as well. Well, we'll do that next. Let's focus on the description now.
Gwen said yellow ruffles in the chat.
Yes, I don't know why I can't see the chat, but yes, yellow ruffles. I don't think that you can talk about this without talking about the dress. So I think that's perfect. Yellow ruffles. I think if you said the yellow ruffles, a lot of people will think about this. If you said Beyonce yellow ruffles, people are going to go right to this music video for sure. Other descriptive words that came up?
Some things from the chat. Kim said proud, freed. I said forever sunflower. And Cherie said swinging baseball bat, red nail polish.
Oh, I didn't even see the nail polish. That's great. Why am I writing this down? Because it's so good. That's why. Okay. Sorry, I'm a natural note taker. So y'all like talking. I'm like, yes, yes. These are all amazing. Did we have somebody in the chat? Yes, go ahead.
The contrast between the desaturation of the opening segment when she's underwater, and then when she's out in the street. not just her clothing, but just everything is much more vivid, is much brighter.
Yeah, the filters that we're talking about here, like the blue versus the yellow kind of ideas. Um, yeah, Forever Sunflower is a great way. The burst fire hydrant, that is also very key, I think, to this video. Thank you so much for joining us, Emma. It will be on the Patreon for an early review and then on the YouTube later. Um, so one word that I have is urban. I think that's the only word I have that hasn't been mentioned. I also have vivid. Vivid is definitely one of the words I chose too. I think, yeah, that was the only one I had that y'all didn't have. Now, when we think about interpretive, we're thinking a lot more about the feel, okay? And this is again, the tone is what we really think authorial here. So I would say that like proud and free would be a very good ways to thinking. Drowning in emotion. I have drowning on my list too. Drowning is because we have both the literal drowning and the emotive ideas. I love that idea. Other ones?
Rebirth.
Rebirth is a great way
The
to
literal emergence in a flood.
Yeah, yeah. Any other words that what we think of when we see this? How does she wield that ballad? Yeah, drinking blood of enemies, religious. I have biblical. I like, but religious works too. Yeah. I finally figured out how to see the chat in case you can't tell. With 5 minutes left, wrecking damage, sure. Yeah, wrecking. Either way, she is definitely creating some damage there.
Sort of a toss between gleeful and joyful.
Yes, I have joy on there. Gleeful is definitely a good way to think about it too, though. I have the word justice, right? Power versus anger. Those are very great words. And this is going to be, the more that we watch and think about these kinds of things, the more personal they become to our own things. So, like when I see Beyonce destroying a street and being joyful about it, I see justice. And maybe that says something about me, but that's okay, right? That's the whole point of writing the poem, is that it's like, what do I see in there? We see two different versions here, full of herself, so arrogance, and we also see goddess-like, fire erupts, so maybe more inspirational. So the way that these two are kind of contradicting, it's again about your interpretation and where you're coming from. Now, how could we think about this? Oh, yes, sorry.
I was going to say, in the contrast between how the women react and how the men react. The women, like, all are universal. They're surprised, but they're also like, yeah. And the men are mostly like, we're just hanging back. We're not getting anywhere near whatever's going on there. But the women all seem to get it. They don't necessarily know, but they know.
Okay, I see what Cherie's saying, and that it's not arrogance, but love of self, sort of, maybe not like confidence, almost, more of like self-worth, understanding her own self-worth. So, apologize if I misunderstood that earlier comment. Yeah, I think these are all great. Now, when we think about how would we approach this if we want to write a fan fiction version, that's when we start thinking of perspectives. And there are so many perspectives here. We could be Beyonce herself. That's some insane fan fiction there. If I were Beyonce, and hold up. And this is when we start thinking about like titles and ideas. So I'm going to play it one more time and think of perspectives here. And it can be inanimate. It can be animate. It can be a person in or out of the video. It can be self-insertion. So, oh, you know what? We don't have time to watch it one more time. I apologize. I didn't realize the time. But I do think that is the next step. We've really laid out the ideas here as far as how to write a classic poem, but to write fan fiction, that's when we start thinking in somebody else's shoes. We're Beyonce. We're the man who cheated on Beyonce. Would I want to be that man? No. But it's definitely a perspective you can take. You can be the baseball bat. You can be the woman who's sitting there when Beyonce walks by with a baseball bat, who's like, "Oh shit." We can get in her mind. What's she thinking? Is she thinking about a past lover who's cheating on her? Is she just somebody who likes drama? Like, who are the people here in these conversations? And those interpretations that you bring to the videos, to your art, to what's I consider fan fiction a way to have a conversation with formative texts that really form us as people. I'll be reading from my Wizard of Oz fan fiction kind of poetry tonight. And Wizard of Oz was very formative for me as a queer woman, as a young woman in general, and a woman from the South, since she's in Oklahoma, Southern. um, but yeah, so I think that, that's something that I certainly do is I think about what formed me as a person and how did that come about, and that's why I got into fan fiction, but it as a way of expressing myself. But I think that, it's also about expanding your imagination. You fall in love with something, you fall in love with a character, an idea, or you just get sparked, and it's following those roads. It's not stopping when the page ends, but making your own pages. So I really want y'all to encourage y'all to think about different perspectives and not to rely on the perspective of the artist, but to create your own. All right. Thank you all so much for being with me today.